The darkness touched you. Everyone could see it in the hollows of your eyes. A gaze averted from life. You ran from it but brought it nearer, led it to him. An endless suffering, worse than death. And you wanted to surrender, abandon and to find peace with the gods. No. The darkness won't allow it. So you will walk into the lair of the beast. Look it in the eye, and you will go to war. This is your mission. This is your quest. There is nothing else left.
Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice is a game I recently played for the first time. Hellblade 2 is coming out next month, so I decided to give this game a try before the second installment. I live in northeastern Italy, and we have an old saying that, literally translated, says, "In the small cask, there's the good wine." Other than implying that we are heavy drinkers, it means something like less is more. My friends highly recommended it, and I've seen some footage of it, so I knew it was a very dark and atmospheric game, relying heavily on the narrative and having mental illness as a central theme. What the Steam description doesn't really convey is that this is a horror game through and through, and I don't play horror games very often. It was generally very well received, but I usually don't rely on others to tell me what's good, otherwise I'd have food poisoning from raw fish every week. The game itself is quite short and doesn't have a lot of replayability. I finished it in a single day because I was so hooked on it. Taking notes and looking for all the lore stones, it took almost 10 hours to complete. The rest of the game follows Senua in her nightmarish voyage, so if you're only interested in that, I think it may take around 6 or 7 hours. Also, talking about achievements doesn't make a lot of sense in this game. The only missable one is unlocked by reading all the lore stones. I usually play very long games, mostly RPGs, so I believe it was its length that initially kept me away from this game, and I was wrong. This game was developed and published by Ninja Theory, known for games I've never played like Heavenly Sword and DMC Devil May Cry, and it came out in 2017. I already had it in my library, part of the famous backlog I hate to have, probably bought on sale or as part of a bundle. The game is heavily discounted pretty often. Another interesting fact is that it was developed by about 20 people, in Unreal Engine 4 for the immersion, and depending on how empathic or emotional you are, it can be an anxiety-inducing and disturbing game. So well done, Ninja Theory, let's dive into it. Our story is set in a fictional late 8th or 9th century, introducing us to Senua, a Celtic warrior traveling to Helheim, the ancient Norse hell. At first, I was asking myself what a Pict from Orkney was doing in a Viking hell. Wasn't this a bad mix-up of things? And I wonder if Norse mythology is kind of overused nowadays. But I immediately discovered that the dark side is strong in this game. The immersion is fantastic, running on 2 tracks, the horror of your voyage through hell, and the horror of being trapped in a psychotic mind. By the first or second hour of the game, it's pretty clear those 2 tracks are one and the same. This is indeed psychological horror. Senua carries the head of her loved one with her in a burlap pouch, and soon we are told she's on a mission, saving Dillion's soul from hell. At the beginning, I was asking myself why a Pict should end up in a Norseman's hell. They had other gods after all. But soon I realized this doesn't matter at all. I'll talk about this in the spoilers section. Immediately, we discovered that she believes she's cursed. She hears voices called Furies that both motivate and hinder her. She's been marginalized, ostracized, and straight up abused for this during her entire life. She's psychotic, or that's what we know using modern-day knowledge. In those days, the game tells us, they gave all kinds of interpretations for mental illness. She had it rough. Senua's story is sort of revealed backwards. We meet her when all the traumatic events have already happened, and they are explained or shown to us as we progress into the story. These revelations are not linear, since you can choose in which order to explore some areas, and in every single one of them we collect a piece of her past. At the beginning, we only know that Senua has taken the severed head of her former love, the seat of his soul, and embarked on a journey following the Northman's myth another man told her. She is set to save Dillion's soul from Hela, the Hell Sovereign. To enter Helheim, we're going to prove ourselves through various trials, fight a fire giant and confront gods. And we're going to fail more than once. We recover and push through. If you find all the lore scattered throughout the game, you will have a bonus dialogue with Truth, the man who knew about the Northmen, before the game's final moment. While this is a heroic journey, it's full of pain and desperation. The game presents a fair share of body horror and anxiety, but is especially heavy in putting you inside Senua's disturbed mind, and it excels at that. This is the part where I talk about the full story, so skip it if you haven't played the game and intend to. Alright, so here we go. Senua is going through an ordeal, and pretty soon the question arises. Is it all in her head? Is this real, in a heroic fantasy way? Or is she really traveling and seeing it all through the lenses of mental illness? We don't have a way to really know. There are different interpretations of that. After some thinking, my personal guess is that she probably really journeyed from Orkneys to some far northern shores, but we see it all through her interpretation of things. Maybe she's really fighting some Northmen on the way, perceiving them as literal monsters in her mind. Worthy of note is that the developers went a long way to consult with experts on mental illness, and with people suffering from psychosis, to make Senua believable. All this research transpires throughout the game. As I said, the story is revealed through the areas you choose to explore, so it might not be in the same order for everyone. The first two challenges are the god of illusion Valravn and the fire giant Surt. I faced the illusions first, and it took me a shameful amount of time to understand how to solve those puzzles. The theme here is confusion, a lack of certainty in a world that changes in the blink of an eye. It's clearly a metaphor for a mind that cannot trust what she sees. The cinematic before the boss fight is particularly disturbing, since in my mind the pecking scene is Senua's coping mechanism for a possible sexual assault she experienced at some point. The fire giant's domain is Senua facing her fear of fire, probably born from the Norsemen raids. I don't know if Senua directly experienced those. The story we uncover says that she exiled herself in the wilds to not hurt Dillion with her darkness. She meant to get a hold of it and return, so she wasn't in the village when the Northmen came. But it's unclear if they had been the victims of the raids before. Maybe her fear of fire was born from seeing the results of the raids when she came back, and from Druth's stories. Reaching the bridge to Hell, Senua is rebuffed violently by Hela, and her sword breaks. Now unarmed, she needs to face Odin's trials to be worthy of Gran, the sword capable of killing a god. Design-wise, those trials present all the situations from the classic horror themes. The labyrinth, the spooky destroyed building, the complete darkness, and the sickness, unjustly being held responsible for a plague that hit the village and being hunted for that. Story-wise, those trials are clearly her personal inner tests. She faces the fears born from her personal life story. She watches herself reflected in a polished surface before plunging into those past harrowing experiences. The wounds she collects during the journey seem real and persist, so maybe she really gained those during the journey, or maybe they are symbolic, a representation of the wounds of her soul. Then, armed with a sword capable of killing a god, we're going to face Hela. To finally reach Helheim, we're going to wade through a literal sea of corpses, one of the most striking levels of the game, and finally face Hell's guard dog. Even when running from it, from a darkness that's speaking to you, stay in the light, we can see how deeply metaphorical everything is. Senua needs to stay away from the darkness of her mind and recover in the light, her moments of sanity. The beast chasing her in the absence of light is another horror trope, but instead of being really devoured by it, she will be defeated and it will allow the rot to spread. The rot is another metaphor for her gradually losing her rationality. Confronting Hela will revert your expectations. You will fight endless waves of enemies, finally listening to the voices that tell you to give in. Instead of dying, Senua will beg, pray, and pledge to Hela, who is distant and silent, an alien. The goddess will grab the magic sword and stab Senua, who will momentarily die and have a final dialogue with Dillion. In this cathartic moment, we have all the pieces of the puzzle. Senua grew up in a small village. Her mother was a healer who suffered from the same condition. Her father, a druid, abused them both through insane punishments. When she was very little, her father convinced the village to burn her mother alive as penance. Left alone with her father, her treatment got worse, raised in isolation inside the house, and often beaten. In one of her rare moments outside the house, she saw Dillion, the chieftain's son, training with a sword. She started to imitate him in secret, probably helped by her talent to recognize and repeat patterns, a skill that we've used during all the game to rebuild paths and bridges. Dillion was friendly with her, and from friends they became lovers. She even found the courage to leave the house and his father to live with him. But hers is a dramatic story. The good part is short. With those brief moments, The game heavily implies that having help in facing one's own monsters, life could be better. Not perfect, but more acceptable. A plague struck. The disease probably came from the water sources being poisoned by the corpses left behind by Viking raids, and she understood that, but nobody believed her, and their village, of course, blamed the cursed girl. The plague took the life of the chieftain too, so maybe death led to unrest. She was deeply scared by a mob of angry people, and was very near to commit suicide, but Dillion changed her mind. Confused and scared by herself, she decided to leave her men and the village behind, seeking voluntary exile in the wilds for an undetermined period of time. She thought to find a solution for herself, but again, being alone didn't help. It's in the wilds that she met Druth, another Celtic man who was imprisoned and tortured by the Northmen. During a raid, he eventually escaped through the flames, and my interpretation of Senua's memories is that she took care of him until he died. During that period of time, he taught her the Northman myths, and this has been the core of our journey with her. In the end, he'll confess that, under torture, he revealed to the Northmen the locations of the villages to raid. When she came back to the village, she found it in ruins. She saw Dillion's body strung, probably killed by a fabled blood eagle. At that moment, she had a breakdown and decided to start her journey to hell. I'm not even sure if she really took Dillion's head, or if that's also a metaphor of her burden. We never really see it, just a burlap sack at her side, filled with something. And to me, this adds to the beauty of the giant metaphor that this game is. In the bonus dialogue with Druth before confronting Hela, he implies that Senua's father might have had a part in betraying their people to the Northmen. We already knew how evil he is. Not a big revelation to be had, honestly. Back in the final moments, we finally see the shape of a skull inside the burlap pouch. Real or not, at this point we don't really know. A strangely expressive Hela throws Dillion's head in the pit below, and then we see Senua again, alive, standing in Hela's place. Hela was her, and she was Hela. The goddess has always been part of Senua, the manifestation of her conflict, and finally letting Dillion go allows her to finally overcome her grief. The rod disappears from her arm, and we see a smaller Hela's body on the floor. She looks directly at us, breaking the fourth wall again, and asks us to follow her to the next story. I don't know if she understands to accept the voices and who she really is, but she certainly let go of her grief that was killing her. From what we know, in Hellblade 2 she will go to Iceland to fight the Northmen. One can only hope the second game will be as good as the first one, and treat the same themes accordingly. In this story, you're going to hell, literally, so you can imagine what kind of landscape you're going to find. Senua is very slow, walking by default and wading through molasses when running. While a little frustrating at times, it's part of the game's atmosphere. She's wading through her mind's abyss. I wish the game had given us the jump in action. There are a few color-coded climbing surfaces, but there are very few compared to those found in much bigger action games. It's like the game gave us just a little taste of it, not really delving into the exploration part. Everything feels like part of a nightmare. Imagine going this low when a monstrous beast is chasing you in the darkness. You start in some weird woods and ruins, and soon are thrown into a blazing inferno. While in the God of Illusion's domain, you'll find quite a few puzzles to solve through illusion doors. It's not difficult once you understand how it works, but it was a little confusing for me at the beginning. Also because this game has no tutorial, you have to figure it out for yourself. You have to look through the arc or the frame of these doors and see what changes in the world. You'll notice walls disappearing or beams to use as a bridge that you desperately need to go forward. Traverse the doors only when you're sure you're going to need that change to move forward, or you'll get confused pretty quickly. Or maybe I'm just an idiot. You'll also find room doors, essentially gates locked by runes. You'll have to find those runes in the area around you, and you're going to form them using shapes from shadows, trees, cracks on wooden walls, all kinds of abstract stuff. You focus on them, literally. Focus is a game mechanic, and that part of the key will be unlocked. Thankfully, the game will show when you're near one of those runes to combine. You visit shores with shuttled ships, prove yourself navigating a labyrinth or through darkness filled with monsters, and rebuild impossible bridges. The bridge puzzle at Helheim gave me a bit of a hard time to solve, again, mainly because the game super well hid a stone door to mend, and it's the only time you'll interact with the world in this way. The darkness trial was an especially interesting experience, and the darkness is not only literal, it's in your mind too, Senua's mind. The game constantly puts you through the horror of hell and the horror of her mind. It's like a pugilist hitting you in the ribs on both your flanks at the same time. You'll also visit your old village suffering from the plague, and they're going to blame you for that because they're ancient, superstitious people, so you're cursed and brought the disease to the village. You're never going to see the mob, but it's going to chase you. Half of my total death came from this level, running from the mob in a maze and finding myself at a dead end. And you have to solve a puzzle during all of this, which is a nice touch. Finally, you'll go to hell, literally, traversing a level called the Sea of Corpses, one of the most iconic levels I've seen in a video game. It's unsettlingly beautiful to wade through blood, seeing giant tormented people trying to grab you, and climbing onto one of them. After that, you're free to enjoy Hela's domain, Helheim, a more obscure and puzzle-filled place. Remember to keep your torch dry. Besides wading through blood and sewage, for the entire duration of the game, bodies are almost everywhere, and they really contribute to the body horror element. They're hanged, in cages, burnt, stacked, torn to pieces, impaled, you name it. Everything is huge, violent, and hostile. Being a Norse nightmare, it's wonderful in its brutality. This game is short and doesn't have a lot of characters. Besides Senua, there are otherworldly voices appearing in her suffering mind or from memories. Most often, those secondary characters are not rendered in-game, but are actors filmed and superimposed over the game. The budget restrictions are showing here, but the actors did a good job. I'll try to talk about them without saying too much to not spoil anything major. The main character, Senua, suffers from psychosis, and she's constantly hearing voices, the so-called Furies. Some will push her forward, others will put doubt in her mind. She's a capable warrior, you'll discover why following the story, but she's broken. Not only by her condition, but also as a result of the treatment received during her youth. Maybe because I don't play a lot of horror games, but I've never heard such desperate screams or seen such expressive eyes. Ninja Theory and Melina Jurgens did an extraordinary job here. Dillion is her lost love, the reason why she embarks on the journey. He's dead, killed horribly by the Northmen. Senua brings his head with her, following the belief that's where the soul resides, and during her crisis, he will be the reassuring voice of reason. He always believed in her despite her condition, and she will remember past conversations with him to push herself through difficult moments, and there are a lot of them. Druth is another Celtic man who has been a Northman's slave, but managed to escape during a raid fire. She met him in the wilds during her self-imposed exile, and he taught her a lot of the Northman myths. During the journey, Druth will be the guiding voice, a sort of Virgil in Dante's Inferno. He got mad during his imprisonment. You can really see the crazy eyes in Senua's memories. Lastly, we have her parents. A violent father who kept her in seclusion, a druid who despised the voices from the underworld she and her mother were hearing, and her mother, a healer who suffered from the same condition and died before her time. And that's it. As I said, it's not a long game, and it's completely centered around Senua. Those characters and the narrator will often break the fourth wall, looking or talking directly at you, but it's a well-executed choice that draws you closer to Senua and makes you feel more involved. Combat, while not being the focal point of this game, manages to be immersive. You encounter several types of enemies as you progress through the story. They're all bestial Northmen, ranging from slender raiders to bulky fighters wielding maces, shields, and axes. Additionally, there are 3 boss fights with unique enemies. They're all brutish and more akin to monsters than humans, likely exaggerated by Senua's perception. The game features typical action-adventure combat, including light attacks, heavy attacks, parries, dodges, and a focus mechanic that slows time. You gather focus by landing blows and avoiding attacks. You can track the meter on the mirror Senua has on her belt. Unfortunately, there's no tutorial, so you have to figure some things out for yourself. Thankfully, the pause menu provides a quick summary of what you might need. Combat itself is relatively easy. I've tried it at different difficulties, and it doesn't change significantly. Enemies have a limited number of moves, and you'll soon learn to parry swords and maces, counterattack, and dodge big axes. As this is primarily a narrative-driven game, I found the combat to be decent. It's enjoyable enough, and my only gripe is with the camera. The game auto-locks on enemies, and when you're surrounded in small spaces, it's a bit cumbersome to switch. I'll admit I'm not particularly adept at action games, but I never died in combat. Once you learn the basics and hit the voices guiding you to dodge attacks or advising how to fight a boss, you're set. Regarding the death mechanic, the game misleads you about the route mechanic. This aspect of the game received criticism for essentially deceiving the player. There is no permadeath. The route spreading on your right arm will never reach your head, and you'll never be forced to restart the game from the beginning. I feel it's important to mention this outside the spoiler section, because many players were deterred from playing the game due to misunderstanding this permadeath mechanic. Now you know it's a ruse designed to build tension. Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice is a game developed by a small group who aim to provide the visual experience of a AAA game. Besides the aforementioned actors, who were filmed and superimposed, the part of the game that's in a real engine is fantastic. The game slows when loading assets, even if you are well above the required specs, which you most likely are, being this a game from 2017. However, switching APIs from DirectX 12 to DirectX 11 in the graphical options solve the issue for the most part. The environments truly convey a sense of inhospitality, danger, and distress. The initial areas may seem a bit generic, the colors are washed out, and you immediately encounter impaled corpses. They consist of overgrown paths and ruins we've seen 1,000 times. Additionally, the waterfalls are not impressive. But then, you delve into the Fire Realm, where everything is burnt down, and you start running for your life, having to fight enemies in a raging inferno. The game throws you into the setting with an ancient and proven technique, a kick in the butt. You can feel the urgency and anxiety, hearing the screams and shouts of people burning alive. While Valravn Keep is bleak and confusing, Surtur's Domain is fast-paced and frightening. Then, we encounter ancient wooden and decayed structures. One entire level takes place on an incredibly long wooden bridge. You can see the distant sun reflecting on the sea and the mountains. Viking ships wrecked ashore, all before fighting for your life. The shipwrecked shore is no different, cold and barren. Next, we're thrown into extremely dark places, sometimes utterly lost, trying to find our way out or avoid monsters. I really like those trials levels, but the most iconic for me was the antechamber to hell. Giant writhing, tormented, and why not, burned corpses all around you, hands trying to grab Senua, rain and ashes pouring down as you fight and traverse a river of blood. Senua is a slender girl with big blue eyes, and those eyes convey discomfort, pain, and anxiety. You can tell the face has been modeled after a real person reenacting those moments. A fun fact is that Melina Jurgens had no prior experience, but did an excellent job in voice acting and motion capturing for Senua. She wears leathers, fur, body paint, and is always dirty, covered in mud or blood. Her hair is very detailed and caked, giving off the impression of an ancient warrior. Enemies are equally well created, brutish and monstrous, enveloped in dried mud and, of course, blood. Wearing animal skulls as helmets, they shout and grunt while lunging at you, like ferocious animals, wielding excessively large swords, maces, or axes. There are only 4 or 5 types of enemies, not counting the bosses, but I appreciate that they decided to focus on a few of them, and to do them well, instead of a lot of not-so-good models. Or even worse, presenting you with the same enemies but changing only the color palette. Sound is extremely well crafted too. The game takes advantage of full binaural 3D sound, so it's best experienced with headphones. In case this is new to you, binaural audio is a technique used to create a 3-dimensional sound experience for listeners using stereo headphones. It works by capturing sound with 2 microphones, mimicking the way human ears hear sound. By placing microphones in the ears of a dummy head, or using a special ear-shaped microphones, binaural recordings can replicate the subtle differences in timing, volume, and frequency that occur when sound reaches each ear separately. When played back through headphones, these recordings create a sense of space and directionality, making it feel like the listener is actually in the environment where the recording was made. Aside from the environment, Senua's cries are the most painful and tormented I ever heard in a game. The whispers, both from her and from the voices in her head, reek of desperation.
What if they're not real? They don't actually make sense.
The gods were lying.
You think it makes sense, but really the gods are playing with you.
It makes sense in your mind, but it doesn't make sense.
Worlds.
The gods, but it doesn't mean anything.
The enemies sound predatory, activated that ancient part of your brain that was useful when running from big hungry animals. The music is often slow, penetrating your mind and suddenly shifting from low to very high tones, elevating the tension. In combat, it is very tribal and visceral, relying heavily on drums. Otherwise, cutscenes can be eerie, with Gregorian chant-like choirs and wind chimes.
Unfair, isn't it? In those dark winter nights in the wilds, there were times when she considered letting go. If it weren't for Druth, a chance encounter in the wilds, she would not have heard his stories of the Northmen. And she would not have this chance to find Dillion's soul.
I'm coming.
As I mentioned, I don't play a lot of horror games, and this is a horror game, even if not advertised as such. Mostly a psychological horror. It's quite short, taking around 6, 7 or maybe 10 hours if you're a completionist, and it often goes on sale. So, if you find the base price too steep for a game this short, feel free to wait for a discount. Combat is decent, even if not the focus of the game, which instead lies in the narrative and immersion. It's story-driven, and there are no branching paths. Essentially, we experience the entirety of Senua's harrowing journey. Ninja Theory managed to pack a lot of emotion and anxiety into a relatively short product. If you're the kind of gamer who enjoys narrative, immersion, and character development, essentially someone who watches my channel, then this game is for you. Maybe it's not for the faint of heart, not because of jump scares, but for the oppressive experience it delivers. Over the years, I've become pretty adept at detaching myself from the most stressful moments. But again, if you are an empathic and emotional person, be aware of what you're getting into. It might be worth it though. Thank you for watching. As always, please participate by liking, commenting, and subscribing. Engage with me. I always try to be very active in the comment section, and I really like to know what other people think of the games I'm playing, what their experiences were, or if they'd never played it for a reason, and if that's going to change. As always, take care of yourself and have a nice day.